is baptism. I remember back in the day when I was dating my wife, Cheyenne, I remember the feelings and the emotions that I was feeling, and you can probably remember some of those too. Like, dating is fun times, exciting times, new things to experience, those initial feelings of love and butterflies in your stomach. And dating is it's one of those times where you get to test the waters of a relationship. Dating allows you kind of to ease into the relationship, like easing into a swimming pool. And so if it's too hot or too cold, you can kind of jump out. And the same is true with a dating relationship. If it's maybe not exactly everything you wanted it to be, then there's always that time that you can just get out of the relationship. And dating relationships are good and necessary, but here's the thing about dating relationships. They can be close, but they're limited. They're limited. You see, there's always an escape hatch in a dating relationship. And because there's an escape hatch that you can get out, that intimacy, that level of relationship that you can get to is always limited, because you can break off that relationship at any point in time. When things get hard or things aren't going as expected, then you can get out. And I know many of my friends back when I was dating, and it's probably the same today, that they just got in a habit of dating and then dumping, and then dating and then dumping. And they went through several relationships in a short period of time because it's easy to get in and to get out. Now, marriage is different. Marriage is intentionally different by design. You see, when you're married, it closes the escape hatch. And when that escape hatch is closed, intimacy can grow and a relationship can flourish. You see, in dating, you're going to love that person and stay with that person as long as it's good. But in marriage, you're making a vow, a public declaration before God and before everyone that you are going to love this person until death does you part. You're going to love that person for the rest of your life. I remember my wedding day, June 2nd, 2007. And the moments that I remember, me standing at the front of the church as I'm looking down the center aisle, and I've got my groomsmen beside me and the bridesmaids over here, and I watched the doors open of the center aisle, and there stood Cheyenne, dressed in her white wedding gown, beautiful as always. And probably today, obviously, more decked out and more beautiful than maybe I had ever seen her before. And the tears begin to flow down my face as her father walks her down the aisle. And I take her hand and we come up on stage and we go through the normal ceremony. And there's a point in a wedding ceremony where you exchange wedding vows and you also exchange wedding rings or wedding bands. Now, the wedding ring and the wedding band is symbolic of the commitment that we're making that day. It's in some ways you could say it's the outward symbol of the inward commitment that we've made to love each other till death does us part. And so that commitment is made and it's symbolized by the wedding band. Well, in a similar way, the baptism is the wedding band of Christianity. Baptism symbolizes the inward decision that you've made. That baptism is the outward declaration of the inward decision that you've made to follow Jesus with your life. You see, God doesn't want any secret Christians. You know, in the New Testament, in the early church in the first century, you can imagine some of the dangers surrounding the new believers as they placed their faith in Jesus. In that day and age, being a follower of Jesus, being a Christian, was actually outlawed. The Roman Empire didn't like other gatherings, other segments of people, because they believed that those gatherings maybe would allow for a revolt or a riot against the Roman Empire. And so those kinds of gatherings were outlawed. And it was dangerous if you were to associate yourself with one of those gatherings. not only dangerous to the Roman Empire, but as you saw Jesus was crucified largely because the Jews opposed him. And so you had enemies on all sides, the Jewish religious leaders, but also the Roman officials and the Roman leaders. They were against Christians and being a follower of Jesus. And so as people were baptized, it wasn't a possibility to keep it silent or secret. It was the unmistakable external act of identifying with Jesus, saying, I'm all in. There's no turning back, and I don't care what happens to me or what people say about me. Jesus is the Lord of my life, and I am all in. And the same is true today. It is the unmistakable external act of saying, I'm all in following Jesus. And that's why baptism should be public. It's a way to demonstrate for all to see this new change that's going on in you. How you've believed in Jesus, and now you're making a choice to follow him with your life. That there's no turning back. So we talk about baptism. There are three things that baptism represents. The first thing that baptism represents is this. It represents Jesus' story. How Jesus lived the life that you and I should have lived, but he also died the death that you and I deserve to die. So baptism is a symbolic representation of Jesus being crucified and killed and laid in a tomb. And then 3 days later, Jesus resurrected from the dead. And so it's a declaration that you and I believe that Jesus died and rose again for you and I. And this is why we believe that baptism by immersion is the most accurate and the best practice, because it fully represents and demonstrates the burial of an old life and the resurrection of a new life. So baptism represents Jesus' story. The second thing baptism represents is the death of the old you and the resurrection or the birth of the new you. And so that change, that transformation that happens where the power of sin on your life is killed and the old ways that you once used to live are dead and buried, and now you have been resurrected to be a new person, a follower of Jesus, adopted into a brand new family. And so it represents the death and the new birth of the new you. And thirdly, baptism represents the forgiveness of sins that you have now received. In a sense, baptism symbolically represents how through Jesus' death on the cross and how his blood was spilt for you and his body was beaten and crucified and how he rose from the dead. Symbolically, baptism symbolizes the washing away of your sins and you being resurrected and clean, brand new. In fact, in the Old Testament it says that your sins were as red as scarlet, and now they've been washed white as snow. And so you're clean and cleansed. Now, baptism is all symbolic for the physical things that faith in Jesus has done in you. He's made you new. You've been born again. You've been washed. You've been cleansed. But it's all through and because of your faith in Jesus Christ.